Hello, I'm Robert Rickover, an Alexander Technique teacher in Omaha, Nebraska, and my guest is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. And we're going to talk today um, about Alexander Technique constructive rest and power poses and how they relate to each other. And I think I'd like you to talk about what power poses are. I think our audience is we don't have to talk, we don't have to explain the Alexander technique, but power poses, I think some teachers aren't familiar with, or students of the, could you just say a brief thing?
Sure. So it's a term that started being used quite a few years ago now. I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Coined in particular, how I heard it from a researcher, social science researcher, I think, Amy Cuddy.
Mhm.
And the idea was that you could be in these expansive poses, postures, and they would help you boost your confidence, boost your mood. There was a little bit of research that was not really, they weren't able to replicate because she was finding things like hormone levels were changing. They haven't been able to replicate that. But what has been seems pretty clear from various studies that our posture does affect our mood and how we feel.
And
So
power poses affect our posture.
yeah, so some of the key power poses you might have heard of would be standing up with your hands on your hips and your legs a little bit wider apart, often called the Superman or the Wonder Woman pose. There's also like the V for victory. You've got your
Right,
arms up
right,
into the
right.
air. And there's they were the kind of two main ones that really caught people's attention. And so you were standing in a very expansive way. However, we've talked in previous podcasts about you could be standing like this and you could have a lot of contraction, which is not expansive, or you could be using a method like the Alexander technique, for instance, to have a little bit more ease, expansion, release of excess tension into the poses, which to me would amplify any potential benefit, and that you could actually have the some benefits of the power pose even when you're not in the power pose, because you can be expansive and spacious within
Right,
yourself as you're just sitting and doing
right.
anything.
I
Yeah.
think power poses were kind of put out there. I think they were they sort of oriented, was her talk oriented to women in particular, or is it more general?
um I can't remember the talk in particular, but I think there is the idea that a lot of um, societally more expansive postures tend to be more masculine.
Like this.
Right, yeah, and the
Hands on top
mansplain,
of your head,
the
like this.
man spreading thing
Yeah,
where their legs are
right,
wide open and you know,
right,
and women's cultural postures tend to be more closed in. I've
right,
got my legs crossed, and
right,
and there's many reasons for that, which we don't need to get into that.
right.
But that also that women could use this technique, if you like, to help give themselves, even if they might not do the power pose in the meeting, if they've done it for a couple, I think the thing was about a couple of minutes in a pose could really, you could take a couple of minutes in the bathroom before you're in that meeting
Right.
and
And it
have
would
the
carry
benefits.
over. It could
Yeah,
carry
yeah,
over. Yeah.
yeah.
And then we
Um,
also talked about an enhancement that I don't think Amy Cuddy talked about at all, where you can actually increase the power of a power pose by also bending your knees. Because all of these, raising your arms or moving them out to the side, or putting your hands on top of your head or the back of your head, and a classic guy thing, which I guess women don't do. as much.
You don't see it in the same way, do you? No.
All of those things elevate your internal center of gravity, and that has the effect of expanding the part of your body. So if you happen to be a bit of a slumper going into those poses, just will take away some of that slump. Now, it won't necessarily last a long time unless you do something like maybe Alexander directions to continue them, but they could have some effects that would make your entrance into the meeting room a little more attention grabbing, I guess.
Yeah. And it's also not so much the other people might not notice, but you might feel more confident in yourself.
Yeah, and I think usually people do when they let go of downward pressure in their body.
Yeah.
So you're the one who introduced power poses to me. I'd actually heard of them before, and recently it occurred to me, but I think it occurred to you almost right away, that there was an interesting connection between constructive rest, classic Alexander technique constructive rest, and power poses. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, well, I did realize quite soon after, and even talked about, constructive rest as a kind of lying down power pose for a little while. But if you think about, especially like the Wonder Woman pose, that when you lie down in the kind of classic constructive rest posture, your your elbows are bent, and this is nice and wide and open, and your hands rest on your abdomen somewhere, which is not that far from the top of the pelvis, which is what people rest their hands on, with hands on hips.
And your legs are bent.
And the legs are bent, and this is an expansive part of the process of constructive rest is letting go and allowing more expansiveness and spaciousness within you. I think one interesting thing just to think about in terms of kind of the status thing about the power pose and that part of it is that the lying down bit itself, being lying on the floor, is not probably the most powerful place to position yourself in relation to other people, right? Do you see what I mean? Because that would be sort of a submissive thing to be lying down.
Well, it would be an attention grabber for sure, but it wouldn't probably be very.
Yeah, I'm talking about more kind of
just without other people around.
Yeah, just in general, lying down would not be thought of as a confidence building thing. Right. And if you think of when an animal like lies down in front of another one, it's a submissive gesture.
Right.
It's not a power play.
Right. But I think the idea behind constructive rest is not so much.
It's not about
what happens
someone else.
It is what happens when you're lying down, but it's even more about how you take that into activity.
So so the main thing I just wanted to mention that aspect, because that to me was the only piece that didn't connect with the power pose idea. But everything else did. And as we know, that the benefits of actually being on the ground or on a table, if you've got such a thing, and letting your body rest helps that expansion tremendously, because you've got something to let go onto.
Right.
And you typically well, I don't know if it's typical, but we're often encouraged to do constructive rest for 15, 20 minutes. So you're getting a really nice chunky piece of time in the power pose.
Right. And part of that 15 minutes suggestion is that I don't think Alexander or most Alexander teachers were thinking in terms of raising your center of gravity by bending your knees and having your arms a little closer to your center. I think the emphasis was more taking compression off your spine, just the biomechanics of that position tend to allow the discs to the discs of your spine to absorb some fluid and get a little thicker, just like when you go to bed at night or when you wake up in the morning, you're usually taller than at night.
Yeah, I heard that it's about 20 minutes gives time for those discs to reabsorb all the, the maximum amount of fluid possible. And so, so that's literally making yourself taller and bigger if you want to.
Right. And so thinking about that as a type of power pose, I thought, well, usually when you're lying in constructive rest, as you said, your hands might be on your torso or they might be lying by your side, but there's no reason why they couldn't be raised above your head, not above, but past your head on the table, which would add to the amount that you're moving your gravity up. The bending, I think the big thing is the bending of your knees. And if you really wanted to maximize your 15 minutes on the table or on the floor, you might even want to experiment with having your legs even a little closer to you, if that's possible, because that's going to raise your center even more. And then, of course, if to the extent that works and the decompression that we talked about earlier with the discs absorbing fluid, then when it's time to get up, if you use an Alexander technique direction, for example, I'm not pressing myself as I roll over and stand up, or however I get to standing. And even when I've arrived at standing, I continue to think, not compressing myself, or whatever direction to use. Then you can carry that advantage that you've gained in this sort of retreat from activity into activity.
Yeah, I mean,
that's really
the whole point of
that is the
rest.
whole point.
Yeah,
I'm just saying there are ways that you can maybe I would say constructive rest is an enhanced version of just lying down at night, for which you will get some benefits. You get more faster, and I think you can increase the amount of effect you get by, as I say, moving your hands up past your head, or bringing your knees a little closer to you. If your habitual way of having your knees bent is to have your knees at a fairly shallow angle, you might want to experiment with deepening the angle a little bit.
And of course, you can enhance the efficacy, if you like, of the constructive rest by using your Alexander directions and awareness. They will help everything about it.
Absolutely. You can use them while you're in constructive rest, and then I think particularly importantly as you're transitioning to standing, because if you've been lying down in either in bed or in a constructive rest situation, going to standing is going to quite likely trigger some habitual ways you have had of standing. So maybe if you're using a direction and you're especially using it right towards the end of verticality, before you feel you have gotten to the appropriate place for standing, maybe you're a little short of that. But at that point, if you've forgotten the direction, it'd be a great time to bring it back so that as you continue, you may find that the way you stand somewhat different. You're giving yourself
Indeed.
a chance to, instead of just rushing through it and getting to what you think of as the end point. Okay, now I'm really standing, and it might involve a little lifting of your chest or pulling your shoulders back or something. If you preempt that, you might find that your standing is quite easy and graceful and functional without that extra effort that you may have habitually put into it. So that's kind of all I have to say about constructive and power poses. And I think, sadly, I don't think the people who are talking about power poses in the non-Alexander world have ever connected with changing your center of gravity. It doesn't seem to be part of that.
I've never heard that. Not that I've done a tremendous amount of research, but I did read quite a bit a few years ago. So.
And I think for those maybe people listening not familiar with them, she did at least one TED Talk on the topic, right?
Yes, that was the initial one, and it
got quite a bit of publicity. Her name
is
Amy.
It's very interesting, and just know if you watch it, the information from about the hormone that they found have not been replicated, so there is a little kind of warning on it, but it's still very interesting.
Postural effect is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if anyone watching or listening to this has any thoughts, please let us know. But anything else you want to say about this connection or this variation of power poses, or perhaps variation?
I don't think so, except that you don't have to think of constructive rest as a power pose. It just sort of is, in my opinion, and that you are kind of getting the benefit of a power pose amongst many other benefits when you do constructive rest.
I think you're gonna get benefits from constructive rest even if you don't do any thinking about anything. You're just there because of that disc situation, and because your center of gravity has moved up, and it may continue to be up for a while. Yeah. Okay, so we'll end the recording. We'll end our conversation here. My guest has been Imogen Ragone. I'll put a link by this to some information about power poses and about the Alexander technique as well. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.